Hello? Okay, what's the problem? I got up this morning, I was in my son's room because I didn't sleep. My back door was open, my husband's guns are all gone, and there's blood on the bed, and she is struggling all the stuff out of her mouth. Okay, so he is there. He's here, but I have to stay on with me. Hang on one thing, I'm going to dispatch officer, stay on. I do have officers.
November 9th, 2005, 6:11 in the morning. A 911 operator in Robinson, Texas picks up the line. A woman's voice comes through, shaking. "My husband's been shot. There's pink foam coming from his mouth." Police arrive within minutes. No broken door, no shattered glass, no signs of forced entry, just a 31-year-old man lying in his own bed, a single-point .22 caliber gunshot wound to the head. And standing in that house, a registered nurse, a mother, a former homecoming queen. Waymon Keith Gentry was devoted to his children, to his marriage, to a woman he trusted completely. That trust would cost him everything. Investigators would find no intruder, no burglary, no explanation that held, only latex gloves in the kitchen trash, and inside one of them, a shell casing. But here's the thing. The surveillance footage, the DNA evidence, the ballistics, none of that would become the moment this case broke open. That moment happened weeks later at the edge of a quiet pond. This is the story of Darlene Gentry, a woman who stood under Friday night lights, who wore a crown, who built a life that looked, from the outside, like everything, and the husband who never saw it coming. If you've never heard this case before, you won't forget it after today. Robinson, Texas, small town, quiet streets, the kind of place where people wave from their porches, and the Gentry family, from the outside, looked like exactly what a family is supposed to look like. Darlene Doskasil had a resume most women in that town could only imagine. Former homecoming queen, a crown under the Friday night lights. She went on to become a registered nurse, a caregiver, a professional, a mother, and beside her, Waymon Keith Gentry. 31 years old, devoted. Friends and family described him that way, consistently. A husband who showed up, a father who was present, a man who worked hard and trusted the woman he married. There were no documented threats against him, no known enemies, no reason, on paper, for anyone to want him gone. But paper doesn't always tell the full story. Behind that family image, prosecutors would later argue something else was quietly building. Financial strain. Tension around money, around spending, around two people who wanted different things, and neither one saying it directly. At the time of Keith's death, life insurance policies totaling approximately $750,000 existed in his name. That number would become central to everything that followed. Here's something worth understanding. Financial stress is one of the most documented motives in domestic homicide cases, not a single explosive moment. Not pure rage, slow pressure, compounding debt, resentment that accumulates quietly until investigators say it can reshape how someone sees the person sleeping next to them. Nobody in Robinson saw it coming. A homecoming queen, a nurse, a mother. Would you have suspected her? Drop your answer in the comments. November 9th, 2005, 6:11 in the morning. The call comes in. A woman's voice, shaking, tells the operator her husband has been harmed, that there is foam at his mouth, that something is wrong, deeply wrong. Emergency responders arrive at the Robinson home within minutes, and they stop, because the scene in front of them doesn't add up. No broken door, no shattered glass, no overturned furniture, no signs of ransacking, no signs of struggle consistent with any kind of intrusion. Just a bedroom. And Keith Gentry, lying in his own bed, with a single .22 caliber gunshot wound to the head. He was rushed to the hospital. He did not survive. He passed away later that same day. Darlene agreed to speak with investigators voluntarily. Then, at some point during that conversation, she invoked her right to remain silent. Investigators noted that. They also noted the scene itself. It had every appearance of a home invasion, but none of the physical evidence to support one. Here's what forensic analysis tells us about staged crime scenes, Real forced entry leaves specific damage patterns, broken frames, splintered wood. A real intruder moves through a space differently than a scene that was arranged after the fact. Investigators are trained to read that difference. This scene was undisturbed, too undisturbed. If someone broke into that house, where were the footprints?
Stand right here and just keep scanning. Don't let anybody near them guns.
As one policeman stood guard over the guns, other officers went inside the house. It was a pressure-packed moment. Officers had to search for an intruder and get Darlene and her boys to safety. And it all had to happen as quickly as possible. The house had to be secured before paramedics could be allowed in to treat Keith. After going through every room, it became clear if someone had been there, they were now gone.
Investigators asked for consent to search the home. Darlene agreed. In the kitchen trash, a pair of latex gloves. On their own, that detail might mean nothing. A nurse keeps gloves at home. That's not unusual, but investigators looked closer. Inside one of those gloves, a .22 caliber shell casing, not beside it, not nearby, inside it. Forensic testing through the Texas DPS crime lab then found something more. Gunshot residue detected on the gloves, and DNA profiles recovered from the material were consistent with both Darlene and Keith. Let that settle. Gunshot residue is the microscopic particle evidence left behind when a firearm discharges. It transfers to hands, clothing, and surfaces in close proximity to the shot. Its presence on those gloves told investigators something significant. Whoever wore them was near that weapon when it fired. And the shell casing, tucked inside, confirmed what the gloves had touched. This was no longer a mysterious home invasion. This was a forensic trail. And it led directly back inside the house. Why would gloves end up in the kitchen trash? On the same morning, your husband is found with a gunshot wound. Investigators didn't rush. They built the case carefully, methodically. On November 28, 2005, 19 days after Keith Gentry passed away, Darlene was arrested. The charge, murder. She maintained her innocence. And then, as the legal process allows, she was released on bond. Here's how that works in Texas. In felony cases, even serious ones, a defendant can post bond after arrest while the case moves toward trial. The court sets an amount based on the severity of the charge, flight risk, and criminal history. Posting bond doesn't erase the case. It means you're free of a cell, ice for ace. Now, Darlene posted bond. She went home. And what she did in the weeks that followed. Most people, after being charged with murder, stay quiet, stay still, wait. Darlene did not stay still. It started with a phone call. Sometime after her release on bond, Darlene reached out to a man named Robert Pavelka. He owned rural property in the area, property that included a pond.
She wanted to know if I had a house for sale. And I told her I had just sold a house, and she said, well, she looked at one out in the basic vicinity that how much would I charge her to do some demolition, take the house out for the lot. I said, well, if you're looking for a lot, because the house was fairly new, it was built in the 80s, so there was a lot of money to spend on it just to tear it down. I said, I have some lots for sale.
The conversation began simply enough. She was interested in the land, she said. Interested in purchasing it. She seemed drawn, particularly to the pond. Pavelka didn't think much of it at first. People buy land. People like ponds. But then the questions shifted. Darlene started asking about the pond specifically, not about the land around it, not about the water itself, about filling it in. Destroying it entirely. Pavelka paused. Something about that. Question didn't sit right. A woman, recently arrested for murder, suddenly interested in a rural pond, then just as suddenly interested in making sure that pond no longer existed. He contacted the authorities. Texas Rangers took note. This kind of behavior has a name in the legal world, consciousness of guilt. It refers to actions taken after a crime that suggest the person knows, on some level, what they did. Attempts to conceal, destroy, or distance themselves from evidence. Courts have long recognized that this conduct can be introduced at trial as circumstantial evidence of guilt. She wasn't just inquiring about land. She was trying to reach something at the bottom of that pond, and investigators were about to find out what it was. Why buy land just to destroy the pond? Tell me what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this story is only getting darker from here. Texas Rangers didn't wait long. After Robert Pavelka came forward, investigators secured consent to search the pond on his property. They brought in the Texas Department of Public Safety dive team. The water was murky, still, the kind of quiet that holds things. The divers went in, and they found it. At the bottom of that pond, a .22 caliber revolver. The weapon was recovered, documented, and sent for firearm analysis. Ballistics testing would determine whether this was the gun used in Keith Gentry's death. It was consistent. Here's how ballistics matching works. When a firearm discharges, it leaves microscopic markings on the projectile and the shell casing, marks unique to that specific weapon, like a fingerprint. Forensic examiners compare those marks under a comparison microscope. If the striations align, if the patterns match, the weapon can be linked to the shot. The revolver recovered from that pond matched the evidence from the crime scene. Investigators now had the weapon. They had the gloves. They had the shell casing. They had the residue. But they needed one more thing. Something that would show a jury not just what happened, but that Darlene knew exactly what she had done. Investigators made a decision. They weren't done with the pond yet. They arranged a controlled call with Robert Pavelka. Pavelka would reach out to Darlene under direction, and the conversation would be monitored. Then they waited. The next day, hidden surveillance cameras were in place, and Darlene came back. The footage shows her arriving at the rural property. She is wearing knee-high boots. She walks directly to the water. She does not hesitate. She steps into the pond, moves carefully toward a specific area, and then, using a rod-like object, she begins probing the mud at the bottom. The exact location where the revolver had been recovered. She was searching for something that was already gone. That footage was admitted at trial, and it did something that witness testimony and forensic reports alone rarely do. It showed the jury who they were dealing with. Not a grieving widow, not a woman in shock, a woman returning deliberately to the place where she had tried to hide a weapon. This is what legal scholars call consciousness of guilt. It's the principle that a person's own actions after a crime, concealment, return, destruction of evidence, can speak to their awareness of what they did. Courts recognize that innocent people don't typically wade into ponds to search for weapons. That behavior tells a story, all by itself. The video sealed it. What innocent explanation exists for that? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Time equals 1.0 seconds greater than by now. Investigators had the how. They had the where. They had the evidence. But a jury always wants to know one more thing. Why? Prosecutors pointed to money. At the time of Keith Gentry's death, life insurance policies totaling approximately $750,000 existed in his name. That's not a small number. That's a number that changes someone's life. Testimony during the trial referenced financial strain within the marriage, concerns about spending, tension around debt and the money decisions. The picture prosecutors painted was of a household under pressure and a woman who had calculated a way out, not through separation, not through divorce, through a life insurance payout. Here's why motive matters, especially in a circumstantial case. Prosecutors don't have to prove motive to win a conviction. The law doesn't require it. But motive answers the human question the jury is really asking. Why would someone do this? It transforms a collection of evidence into a coherent story. And coherent stories, ones that make sense, are what juries remember when they close the door to deliberate. $750,000, financial strain, a husband who trusted her completely. Prosecutors had their answer.
Sad but happy. Sad for her, because it's proven that you killed him. That's proven. But happy that that trial is over with.
February 6, 2007, the 19th District Court in McLennan County, Texas, More than a year after Keith Gentry was buried, the case finally came before a jury. 5 days. That's how long the trial lasted. Prosecutors laid the case out in sequence. The 911 call, the undisturbed scene, the latex gloves, the shell casing, the gunshot residue, the DNA, the pond inquiry, the weapon recovery, the ballistics, and then the footage. The surveillance video from the pond was played for the jury. The courtroom watched Darlene Gentry wade into that water in knee-high boots, watched her move toward the exact location where the revolver had been found, watched her probe the mud with a rod, searching in silence. The defense challenged the case, argued the evidence was circumstantial, that no one had directly witnessed the shooting, that the prosecution's theory was constructed, not proven, and they were right. That much of the case was circumstantial. Here's what people often misunderstand about that. Circumstantial evidence is not weak evidence. It is evidence that requires inference, connecting facts to reach a conclusion. Courts have long held that a conviction built entirely on circumstantial evidence can be just as solid, sometimes more so, than one built on eyewitness testimony, which carries its own documented unreliability. When enough pieces align, they form something undeniable. On February 8, 2007, after approximately 5 hours of deliberation, the jury returned guilty. The following day, the sentence was handed down, 60 years in prison. A conviction is not always the end. Darlene's legal team pursued every available avenue. In 2008, an appellate court reviewed the case and affirmed the conviction. The evidence held. The verdict stood. In 2010, the Yeri case was remanded for additional findings related to a habeas corpus petition. A habeas challenge is different from a standard appeal. An appeal argues that something went wrong during the trial, a legal error, improper admission of evidence. Habeas corpus goes further. It argues that the continued imprisonment itself is unlawful, based on constitutional violations, new evidence, or ineffective legal representation. Darlene's petition raised those questions. In 2017, 12 years after Keith Gentry was buried, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals denied relief. Every door had been tried. Every door had closed. Darlene Gentry remains incarcerated today. Her earliest projected parole eligibility is approximately 2037. The homecoming queen who once stood under Friday night lights, the registered nurse, the mother. She has spent every year since 2007 behind prison walls. And Keith Gentry, 31, years old, devoted, trusting, never got the chance to grow old. The pond footage still exists. The evidence still stands. And the case of Darlene Gentry remains one of the most quietly chilling domestic homicide convictions in Texas history. Not because of what she did in that bedroom, but because of what she went back for.